Hey, happy post-lunch session. Who's ready for a nap? Woo, yeah. That's okay. We won't embarrass you if you fall asleep. Go right ahead. So, yeah, if you have empty chairs next to you, you can maybe raise your hand. There's some folks standing in the back. So who's here from community college? All right, and from a university? Woo-hoo! Whoa, like, other organizations? What other organizations are? Yeah.
It's a statewide organization, State Arizona, that maintains the articulation agreements.
Cool.
Online.
Great. So statewide organization, other research organizations. That's awesome. Well, welcome. My name is John Fink. I'm a research associate at the Community College Research Center, which is based at Teachers College, Columbia University in New York City. Woo-hoo! Yeah. Yeah. All right. New York. How many from the New York City? Big Apple? Oh, yeah, Brooklyn. All right. That's cool. Man, that's cool. Nice. Anybody from Philadelphia? Eagles? Go Eagles? All right. All right. Big day. I live in Philadelphia, and I'm very sad to be missing the parade today, but you know, but I also love transfer students, so yeah. Yeah, right. All right. Okay, so this is a follow-up session from the panel this morning on the Takes Two to Tango. I'm going to talk a little bit about the findings, but I'm also going to just sort of indulge in sort of overviewing a lot of the key findings from a lot of CCRC research in the past few years, as well as talk about some tools that you can use based on the findings to improve outcomes at your campus for transfer students. All right. So we'll be talking mostly about two publications, very similar findings, drawing on the same work. The Transfer Playbook, which we produced in partnership with the Aspen Institute in May of 2016, as well as the paper in the Transfer Matters publication from Community College Review. Really, the focus here is on essential practice of highly effective transfer partnerships. Here's the summary of findings. And this morning, I, of course, made the rookie mistake of just spending all the time on the methodology and not talking about the findings. So I wanted to just put a little bit more meat on the bones in terms of what we actually saw at the partnerships that we visited, that we identified using clearinghouse data as being highly effective nationally. When we went and spent a day on each campus at community colleges and universities and talked to a lot of different groups, we had these three broad strategies that seemed to surface across these partnerships. But I just wanted to talk a little bit more about each of these before sort of going into some other findings and discussion on the findings. So first thing that I mentioned, the first strategy that we noticed is that the colleges, the community colleges and universities were making transfer a priority. And at a lot of the community colleges, this had been happening for many years. Community colleges that have particularly had transfer as a real core part of their mission. You know, this wasn't that surprising to see, but I think a big finding was that at the universities there was a lot of support from the leadership that we need to prioritize transfer students. There was kind of a recognition, a lot of times at more broad access universities that were serving so many transfer students, like so many of their undergrads were transfers, recognizing that this is not like a subpopulation, this is like the population that we need to be working with. So they were doing things like connecting it to the mission, you know, using data to sort of dispel myths about transfer students on the campus. One of the great examples from Colorado State University, and this was back in like 1999, 2000. Their IR office had put out a publication that was like debunking the top 10 myths about transfer student at Colorado State. And it just kind of went one by one with like kind of like a myth about transfer students. Like transfer students are students who wanted to come to Colorado State but then didn't get in, and so they went to Front Range Community College and then came to Colorado State. And then they were able to just say like, well, no, actually, you know, only X% of transfer students had previously applied to Colorado State. So kind of like going one by one, or like transfer students don't do that well when they get to Colorado State. Well, no, actually compared to people who started here, transfer students who get an associate degree, you know, graduate at these higher rates. So kind of like using data to sort of dispel myths or stigma around transfer students. This was a way that we saw that colleges were making a priority. Of course, also dedicating significant resources to transfer students. That's also a way that leadership can support the work that you all are doing. I'm sure if I asked who feels like they have adequate resources to do their roles with transfer students, I don't think anyone would raise their hand. So that this, and I think that there is a business case for higher ed leaders and college presidents and enrollment managers that, these transfer students, you can't neglect this population. You need to really focus, and this is a population that's growing and large in many places. So that's the first strategy, prioritizing transfer student success. And I mentioned this morning, but these three things kind of work together because it's really hard to do number two unless transfer success has been prioritized. The second strategy, creating clear pathways, programmatic pathways, and aligning not just curriculum but instruction. One of the keys that we saw there is that university faculty or deans or department chairs were actually working in collaboration with community colleges, meeting regularly to sort of touch base on curriculum changes and to think about it from the student's perspective. Okay, a student in business who's going to start at a community college and get a bachelor's in business, like what is the ideal sort of like curricular sequence for them to do? What courses should they take at the community colleges? How can we get as many pre-major courses identified correctly that will all apply to the bachelor's degree in business at the university? It's really hard to, faculty at universities have a lot of demands on their time, but if there's not support in prioritizing transfer student success from leadership, it's really unlikely that those sort of conversations or space is going to be made. Someone asked me a question before about but how do we get started with this? This seems kind of daunting to think about doing this for all of your students. One thing that we heard was that community colleges or universities, in sort of building trust, building the relationship, they just started by looking at the largest sort of enrollment programs, or maybe the ones that just are bubbling up, there's the most pain points or the most kind of problem areas. You don't have to do everything at once. I think starting with one or two majors or programs or colleges and kind of backwards planning, that can be a good way to sort of build momentum and sort of generate early wins to sort of keep the work moving. Okay, and then the third one, provide tailored transfer student advising. We really mean holistic support, not just academic advising. We kind of split this out into two different sets of practices. And of course, we elaborate on all of this and give more examples in our publications. But for community colleges and for 4 years. So for community colleges, one of the hardest challenges, and this is assuming sort of the connection to the other one. So assume you have the priority on transfer students and you have very well articulated academic pathways. Like you theoretically could tell a student or give them a sheet of paper to say, you want a bachelor's degree in psychology from this university? Here's your pathway. But if students don't know they want a bachelor's degree in psychology from that university, they are maybe unclear about their major, unclear about where they want to transfer. They want to get a job as X, but they don't really know what sort of education is required for that, or how much money would I be making in that job, and what's my kind of growth potential for my career. Those sort of even bigger conversations, I think, are really falling on community colleges to have with students. And we can have really great pathways, but if we're not getting students into those pathways, it's kind of doesn't really do anything. They're just kind of resources sitting out there students aren't utilizing, as well as supporting students along those transfer pathways as they kind of encounter really key courses like gatekeeper math courses, providing extra support so that they're kind of succeeding and progressing through those coursework. So that's kind of from the community college perspective, helping students to clearly articulate their interests, explore their options in terms of careers, but also transfer and bachelor's degree, as well as continuously monitoring their progress. And helping students to plan not just academically what courses they need to take, but what sort of co-curricular things they can do to sort of enrich their learning in the field. Who can they talk to? What sort of internships can they get? And also financial planning. We heard a great example at Holyoke Community College that their financial aid staff were helping students to plan out how are they going to pay then for their whole bachelor's degree. And this was a big problem that was coming up because a lot of students might not realize the length of their Pell eligibility, and then if they're kind of using most of it up or all of it up before they're transferring, really just things start to get more expensive after that. So helping building financial plans was key as well. From the 4 years side, I think just a lot of times having committed personnel, advisors, working with transfers, things like pre-transfer advising. We visited Western Washington University in Washington State, and we heard from their advisors and their admissions folks that they just constantly were saying to prospective transfer students, you have to be major ready. Be sure you're major ready. You have to have declared a major and be prepared to enter a major upon entry at Western Washington. Like, we might not even accept you unless you're major ready. That sort of like messaging was very much sort of coordinated between the community college and university so that students could really know that they needed to get an associate degree and prepared to enter a major at the university. Another thing that came up in conversations with someone else, but I think a key question is how's financial or merit aid dispersed to transfer students, and is it equitable to that of non-transfer students? There can be sort of explicit policies discriminating against transfer students, or it could just be how practices have evolved over times that their transfer students are just kind of like last to the well in terms of getting funds. But students are picking up on this. Like, one of the quotes we had from a student, she was just confused. She was saying, well, I applied to the university as a high school senior to be a new freshman, and I got like thousands and thousands of dollars of aid. But then I went to the community college and applied again as a transfer, and I didn't get any money, no aid. Like, I'm the same student, potentially even a better applicant. Like, where's the money? And I think we all realize why that's happening. It's because of how admissions and recruitment works for new freshmen. But I think that this was something that a lot of the universities were grappling with, how to make that fair in terms of allocating aid. So those are kind of the overall findings, a little bit more sort of substance than what I could talk about this morning. Any reactions or questions to that? I saw some head nods. Curious to hear what you think. What's missing? Also that might not be encompassed by these, because this is just based on our field work to these 6 different sites. And I know that there's so much other work happening too. Yeah.
Reviewing the partnerships with universities and community colleges, the committed personnel that you discussed a little bit, did you see that the partnerships that had more like university liaisons on the community college campus were more successful and like maybe a recruiter advisor hybrid?
Yeah, I think we saw a lot of different structures, at some, especially around like how the credits are being like applied or the credit equivalency happening. We saw some universities that had basically like someone doing all of it, and I think that was easier to streamline. But then we saw other universities where it was a lot of the credit equivalencies were being sent out more to like faculty and department chairs. So yeah, I think that a lot of the places we went, especially the smaller colleges, there typically was like a transfer like guru or champion that was kind of a hub. At some of the places we visited, I remember at UMass Amherst, one of the places we visited, the person who was in that position had been doing it for like 25 years and had like really developed a lot of support and trust from the faculty in making decisions around credit applicability. She recently retired, so you kind of wonder, like, how are they dealing with that? So I don't know. I think there could be a lot of different models, but just, the key thing is that the partners need to be in regular kind of communication because changes are always happening. So.
Two quick questions. First, kind of goes along with that. How do you battle the quick turnover in enrollment and admissions and counselors? Every 1 or 2 years it's someone new. How do you keep that relationship going when you have to start over every year? And second part, how would you advise university advisors in academic departments and community college advisors to kind of work together to create, worksheet that says if you're transferring here, this is what you need to take your freshman and sophomore year, because it's hard for us to catch them early enough to tell them what they need to be taking at community college.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think probably some of you might have better responses to those questions, but I mean, I'll add that going back to like prioritizing transfer and the importance of leadership and like your provosts or your presidents, like knowing about transfers, you know, trying to build relationships with the local community college or local university. I think that's sort of like top like priority setting, and like those folks can do a lot to sort of just keep those relationships and those doors open for communication, and that definitely funnels down to our staffs working across. Yeah, I mean, I think that turnover can be really tough. We talked to some folks that they said that like they always give, like their transfer admissions folks are always kind of like they're really like strong admissions staff or something. It's kind of because it's such a challenging puzzle solving sort of position. But yeah, we just visited really once for this study, so I'm not really sure like how folks are dealing with that, but I'd invite anyone else to share some insights on it.
One of the things that we've had to do is prioritize our administration and admissions staff, old and new, having annual meetings with just the key community college players, and even the community college players change a lot too, but just prioritizing that from the top presidents kind of, and then trickling down with their key players, but making it an annual thing. Like we need to have a meeting of an update of, hey, here's what's going well, but here's what we would like moving forward, and kind of making plans and keeping that communication kind of open.
Sure, sure. Yeah.
One thing I'll say about the second point, since I do work as an academic advisor, and so at my institution in Texas, we are fortunate enough to have like a common core numbering system, right? And I know every state is not like that. And so what we have done though is we have talked to the community colleges that we work with, and we just pretty much map out saying these are the courses that will satisfy the general core or the general education block, or however you phrase it at your institution, and that gets updated annually. And it's responsible from the academic affairs side, and then the advisors indicate which course it is done, but then it's disseminated through the student affairs side in admissions. And so because at my institution, transfer students just go to general admissions, more like a centralized hub.
Right, so we don't have a transfer student center either. Like,
right.
We don't have a welcome center or transfer.
No, and I think in general we still managed to work that out because those students at the community colleges and those community college advisors and admissions representatives see that transfer planning guide and they're already using it. So they already say, okay, so if you're coming in, for the, in this case now it'd be 2018-19, right? We're gonna have the 2018-19 transfer planning guide in May or June when the catalog is released. Right? And so when that student comes in and maybe just graduated from high school this calendar year and goes 1 year into community college, at least they know what they're going to take to still satisfy it.
Yeah.
So if we want to talk about that, we can.
Yeah. So I want you to save your thoughts, because what I wanted to do is just I wanted to surface this, what we're learning about practice. I also want to review just some key findings from what we're learning about some of the barriers or our findings around transfer, and we're talking really about vertical transfer, so getting more community college students bachelor's degrees. And I'm going to revisit this after I present on that, and I just wanted to kind of surface this so you all could start thinking about what you're doing in relationship to our findings from this study. And as I go through talking about our key findings around barriers to transfer, I want you to think about what you're doing, but also these findings, and where do you see the kind of the crossover in terms of practices and policies that are addressing some of the major barriers to transfer. So let's see. Come on. Okay. So we've been putting out a lot of research on transfer. We've been, doing a lot of work with national and state databases to look at sort of more administrative, from an administrative or kind of bird's eye level, what are the barriers? So there's Jason and Dimple's article kind of reviewing the literature of transfer, I think was really great because it pointed out that we need a lot more. And I think that this is kind of from one approach, and I have some findings from this approach of more this 30,000 foot level, looking at sort of general trends. There's not a lot of information on students, but just in terms of this overview perspective, I think there are some sort of things to glean, but obviously we need to go kind of more into qualitative work to get more of the rich details. But I wanted to review some of this work. It's a little bit lagging. So in 2016, we released a report called Tracking Transfer that put out sort of measures of institutional performance on transfer for community colleges and universities using National Student Clearinghouse data. This is something that now the National Student Clearinghouse Research Center is going to be releasing every year as a signature report. And this puts out basically state averages and national averages for these measures of how your institution is doing with transfer students, like the transfer out rate, the rate at which transfer students get an associate degree, and then the bachelor completion rate for transfers. So I'd encourage you to check out these resources, because this is a way that you might be able to benchmark your institution's performance on transfer. There's also been a working paper of transfer in Virginia that I'll talk about. And, oh no. We had some interest from Google in looking at what's the role of community colleges in preparing students to transfer and earn a bachelor's degree in computer science. That I think has some really great implications for the transfer pathway in computer science and STEM. And I'll talk about another working paper asking the question, given how much credit loss there is it really cheaper to start in a community college? And then a paper that released on Monday that's looking more at excess credit and credit loss using student transcripts. So I'm going to, this thing isn't really working, so I'm going to stand over here. All right, so I'm going to sort of synthesize all of this research that we've been doing with a little bit of research that others have been doing into 5 key findings here. So this is kind of what I think we're learning about transfer students from this research. And I'll go through each one of these and revisit it just in case you want to. OK, so the first one. So what we're seeing is that transfer outcomes are low and they're inequitable. But some states and colleges are doing better than others. So there's variation in the outcomes. So here's kind of the overall picture. This is pulling from this most recent signature report from the National Student Clearinghouse on the entering cohort of community college students in fall 2010. Have 850,000 students about. There's been some good conversation about this, like what are students' intentions when they start, and what is the vertical transfer gap. But we know from some surveys that a large portion of these students intend to earn a bachelor's degree. We found that about a third of them transfer in 6 years. A small proportion of transfer students get an associate degree before they transfer. Comparing to our past study, though, this does seem to be creeping up. And then relatively small number of them actually get a bachelor's degree in 6 years. So one study was 13.3%. Our study was 13.6%, but we rounded up to 14. But it's basically just a really low number. And then if you look at that number, there are these equity gaps by race and income. One of the struggles with transfer data is that we don't have good national data on race with transfer through the National Student Clearinghouse. We used a measure of socioeconomic status and show that there's this gap by student income. But in another signature report, we were able to sort of figure out that there are also these racial gaps. And this is very much consistent with prior literature in terms of how many entering community college students wind up with a bachelor's degree within 6 years. So it's showing pretty big gaps in terms of looking at Black and Hispanic students compared to white students. So the outcomes are low, the outcomes are inequitable. There is variation, though, when you look by state. This is that 13 or 14% number. Some states are doing much better than others, like Illinois, New Jersey, Missouri, New York, up here at the top. Still pretty low overall. I think everyone's under 20%, so less than 1 in 5 students. And of course, all of this is available. This is from the Clearinghouse's update to Tracking Transfer, the signature report.
And George is on the bottom.
Right.
There you go.
There's also a lot of variation when you look at individual community college performance. All these dots are individual community colleges. And this is their bachelor completion rate for transfer students. And this is just the number of transfer students that each of these colleges were sending. So if you look at this, you've got some pretty large colleges here, 2,000, 2,500 transfer students. And you have some that have a 40% completion rate and some that are more like 70% completion rate. So pretty large variation in terms of individual community college performance, which is partly what motivated our study to look at high performers, is really kind of, let's go to the places that seem to be doing well and see what they're doing. OK, another key finding is that many bachelor's degree seeking community college students don't transfer, let alone complete. This is a study from Virginia. And what's great about this study is that it didn't just look descriptively, which a lot of our work just kind of looks descriptively at all students. This study compared students who started at Virginia community colleges to students who started at Virginia four-year colleges that were matched on similar characteristics like high school achievement, matched on student characteristics, matched on the sort of course taking in the first term. So, potentially equivalent samples of students, just some started at a community college, some started at a four-year college. And all of the other thing that's great about this study is all of the two-year entrants in this study, they all said that they wanted a bachelor's degree when they entered the community college. But here's what they found, our CCRC colleagues. They found that this is our transfer out rates. So overall, only 23% of the community college entrants ever transferred to any four-year institution, and this is within 8 years of starting. If you look at associate degree earners, remember these are students who all said they wanted a bachelor's degree, about 2/3 of them ever transferred. But just think of all the students who aren't transferring that said they wanted a bachelor's degree. They're matched equivalently to four-year entrants. And then in 8 years, they're not even showing up at a four-year institution, let alone completing. And if you look at this by credit load, this is how many college-level credits, so we're not even talking about remedial education here, but college-level credits that these students have earned. And you're looking at students who are getting 40, 50, 60 or more college-level credits at the community college. They're making pretty good progress, but then they're not showing up at a four-year institution within 8 years of starting. So folks were asking this question before, and I think that this sort of lends even more urgency to asking the question, why aren't students transferring, or what's happening? And maybe we need to know more about intention at the start, but it seems like a really large number of students are making progress but not transferring. 3, transfer paths are unclear. If students do transfer, it seems pretty chaotic and unstructured, the paths that they're taking. This is a visualization of transfer networks in a region of the country. So this is using clearinghouse data and just kind of plotting all the blue dots. And this is kind of mesmerizing. If you look at it, you'll get dizzy. But so the blue dots are community colleges in this region, and the gray dots are four-year colleges. And there's just a line in between colleges that at least one student transferred in between. So as you can see, it just like is a tangled mess. This is a very complex system. If folks are working at community college or at a four-year, you probably know that you receive students from like dozens and dozens of institutions. There's so many transfer partners that you have. It can be quite challenging to think about how do we grow and sustain our partnerships with colleges if we have so many. Where do we start? And one of the things that we're hearing, and I think the implications of this, is that folks are starting with their major partners, so the largest sending and receiving institutions, or perhaps aspirational partners, like what sort of universities or community colleges would you like to work with? But the idea is that just you kind of need to be strategic in thinking about your partnerships. And some of the key pieces of information to do that is to figure out which are your main partners and what's the success of students in those partnerships. Are a lot of students transferring with an award, with an associate degree? Are a lot of students transferring and earning a bachelor's degree? That can really help to sort of help you prioritize your partnerships. We also know that not many students are following the 2+2 pattern of transfer. This is looking at students who completed a bachelor's degree, who started in community college in the fall of 2007, and they completed a bachelor's degree within 6 years. So definitely, a subset of transfer students. But if you look at just what are their enrollment patterns, like how many years do they spend at a community college, and then how many years do they spend at a four-year college, it turns out that actually very few graduates follow this 2+2 pattern. We found only 8% of community college transfer graduates follow the 2+2 pattern. They spent 2 years at a community college, 2 years at a 4-year college, and then they got a bachelor's degree. There's a lot of other common patterns, but the biggest one is 2+3, 3+3, 2+4, 3+2. Remember, this is all within 6 years. There's a lot of little slices of the pie here. The most common pattern was having an enrollment break, meaning that for at least a year or more during that 6-year period, these students just weren't enrolled anywhere. So they just took a year or more off and then graduated and got a bachelor's in 6 years. I find that really remarkable that so many students did that. Yeah.
Did you come across students getting 2 associate's degrees at a single college?
Yeah, we didn't exactly look at that. I'm sure it's happening, but yeah, we looked for kind of any community college award before transfer. So. We also know that if transfer paths are unclear, it seems like they're very unclear as well in computer science or STEM. This was a study, we kind of broadened our scope a little bit. We looked at 1.8 million community college students tracked for 7 years from 2007 to 2014. There was a companion study that surveyed and interviewed these students. And what we found is that the students who successfully made it through, first off, we have 1.8 million community college entrants. Only 3,290 got a computer science bachelor's degree. So this is just like a very, very small percentage of students who started a community college in this cohort were able to successfully make it to a computer science bachelor's degree. So I think this really kind of surfaces questions around, okay, so the transfer pathway to a bachelor's degree is really important in terms of getting folks into higher paying jobs. But when you look at the most highly remunerative jobs like STEM and computer science, it seems like this is an even tighter pipeline, even leakier pipeline. So first off, it's just not very representative of the greater community college population. Way more male, so 87% male compared to like 50-50 community college entrants, and much more likely to be from higher socioeconomic neighborhoods. Again, we didn't have race to look at in the study, but I'm sure you'd also see similar sort of equity issues with race. We also thought it was interesting that among these 3,290 graduates, they had about 1,200 different sort of enrollment patterns. When you're looking at sort of term-by-term enrollment between community colleges in 4 years, basically just it seems like it's not no 2 students are alike. It seems like more like no 3 students are alike in terms of their sort of enrollment sequence between community colleges in 4 years. This isn't necessarily a bad thing. It's just, this is just descriptive sort of, this seems to be happening. We have a very chaotic and complex transfer system. But you probably didn't need me to tell you that. We also found that the students who did make it through seemed to be both focused and fortunate. You could also think of this as privileged in some ways. So they tended to stay at a single college in 4 years. They didn't have as many enrollments at different colleges. They tended to go to a college, went to college and a 4-year with good transfer support, meaning that the colleges they went to tended to be higher in our transfer outcomes that we derived in another study. And we did see some evidence that they're living a little bit closer to tech hubs, which was something that Google was interested in sort of seeing, the idea of the regional economy sort of generating interest and sort of motivation into computer science. But it seems that while there is a great potential for community college transfer into STEM and computer science, as we were hearing this morning from Julie Wang, it doesn't seem to be working that well right now, and it seems to be producing some inequitable results. This is just a summary from one of the papers from Julie Wang that we think is really interesting. She used data mining techniques looking at transcript data on students who wanted to transfer into STEM. And one of her main findings was that students seem to transfer more successfully into STEM if they were able to take a STEM course or like a program course in STEM before they took a math class. So it's this idea of kind of getting a taste of what STEM could be like, sort of getting that motivation to sort of help you, through those math courses. That it's really, it's really the math that's kind of the main issue here. So you got to hear some of her research this morning. Okay, so another finding. Rampant inequitable transfer credit loss leads to extra time to degree, extra costs, and decreased likelihood of completion. So credit loss is an issue for a variety of reasons. And likelihood of completion, cost, time, and we've done some recent work looking at this, and I think we need a lot more looking at transfer credit loss. So folks were mentioning before this GAO report looking at the average loss in transfer credit using NCES data. I think someone already mentioned this before, but there was a lot less credit loss when you're looking at transfers between 2-year publics and 4-year publics. There was perhaps the most credit loss going to the 4-year private for-profits in this study. Although I'd be interested to hear folks' reactions to this. Maybe we can talk later. But it's just from our work out in the field, it seems like maybe this has changed, because now it's like the for-profits are like, we'll take any of your credits, just transfer here, and we'll give you a bachelor's degree. Like, just do 30 credits. Like, we'll take up to 90. So I don't know if this has changed. The landscape has changed a little bit. So. OK, so this is a study from Monahan and Attewell. They used BPS data, National Representative Survey of transfer students. They found that only about 58% of students were able to transfer most of their credits. About 15% of transfer students essentially, and these are community college to university transfers, they essentially had to start over. But I think a big contribution from this study was that the students who were able to transfer most of their credits were about 2.5 times more likely to get a bachelor's degree, controlling for a lot of other effects among the community college entrants. So they identified this, that not only is it a cost issue, but it's also a bachelor's degree issue as well. Yeah.
Just a quick question. Do you differentiate at all here between transferability and degree applicability?
I wish we could, but basically all the studies on credit loss are all about transferability, because applicability would be the thing to look at, but it's essentially impossible to study. It's not impossible, but it's very tough to study on a multi-institutional level.
It's major too, so what does that mean?
Yeah. Well, because from a researcher perspective, we'd need to do degree audits of everyone's transcripts to see which credits weren't applied, which would be very useful information, but it's hard to do at the level we're working at. And I think we need research. And if anyone's has figured out a way to do that or wants to think about that, well, I'll show in the next couple of slides. We're also thinking about just looking at the total credits at graduation as another way to sort of think about transfer credit loss. But yeah, the applicability, that's really what we need to study, but it's squishy.
Because that's where students get hung up, I think, that they're told by somebody, you have all the credits transferred.
Yeah.
But it's what did they do?
Did they apply to the degree? Yep. Yeah.
So kind of to that question, I'm curious if it was looked at university policies regarding the total amount of transferable credits that are allowed. So I know a lot of 4 years say you're only allowed 60, 75, 90, whatever to be accepted. And we actually just completely removed that policy from our university because we realized that we have a residency policy anyway, and our program requires so many upper division credits to graduate to meet programmatic requirements for accreditation and things along those lines. So we, obviously for financial aid purposes, we don't want students to come to us with a lot of credits, but why are we saying we're going to make you lose those when you come here? So
yeah.
Those policy was looked at all.
Yeah, we haven't looked at it, but yeah, that would be, that'd be interesting to see which colleges have those policies and how much do they allow.
58% is because of those policies instead of just the applicability.
Yeah. I think you'll be interested. Okay, so another way to look at inefficiency is look at the total number of credits when you graduate among completers. And the good thing here is that you're getting the full picture. You're not missing out on credits that were accepted but just never applied. But you're only looking at completers, so you're missing out on this huge group of students who aren't completing a bachelor's. So that's the trade-off. We've had some this is the Virginia study again. Remember, these are equivalently matched groups of students who started at a 2-year versus a 4-year. And this is consistent with some other studies like in Texas and other places that are showing that in general, 4-year entrants they're graduating with more credits than they need. But the transfer students seem to be having that problem a little bit more. So in this study, they're finding the 4-year entrants are having about maybe 1 or 2 extra classes on average, and the transfer students who transferred in and completed are having essentially an extra semester's worth of courses. And these are averages, and there's a lot of variation here. But it's important to take into account looking at any type of credits, including developmental versus just college level credits, but pretty similar findings. So it seems like transfer students are having more excess credits when they graduate. This is a paper that we just released on Monday looking at excess credits among completers in 2 states. And there's kind of a lot to unpack in this paper, but one of the first things I wanted to just share is if you just look at the total number of excess credits, first off, in these 2 states, it was like 27 or 29 excess credits. So that would be like 147, 150 credits at graduation. Granted, this is attempted, so students don't complete every class they attempt, but we did all of our analyses looking at credits earned as well and found very similar results. But if you just want to talk about cost, students are paying for all the credits they attempt. So look at this by race, though. You essentially see like a pretty big equity gap here. So the black students in one state, on average, were attempting 46 extra credits than they needed to, compared to 29 in that state. The 2 colors are just the 2 different states, so you can see how they fare. So you see some, so our credit loss, I think there's like a racial component here in terms of equity, and I think this needs to be studied further, what's going on. I'll just show you also this split down by a couple other things. So whether or not students got an associate degree. So in one state, it was about the same, yes or no on the associate degree among transfers who completed a bachelor's. Pretty similar, I guess a little bit less if you did. And this is just descriptive, like averages, so we're not really controlling for other effects here. But then if you look at another state, it seems pretty different. So the students who did get an associate degree seem to have more excess credits attempted. And I would imagine that this varies a lot by context because some places the associate degree for transfer is much stronger in terms of articulation than others. Yeah, Alexa.
2 other points about the excess credits. One is that if you're looking at excess credits for a bachelor's degree, you can't tell if the student might have accumulated those excess credits at the community college before transfer. Which we've certainly seen at CUNY a great deal. And the other thing is that even if there is no difference in the excess credits between the transfers and the natives, there could still be a major problem there for the transfers because they may have had to use all their electives to repeat courses that they were denied applicability from when they transferred. So even though they don't have more excess credits, that doesn't mean that they weren't at a disadvantage because of credit transfer issues when they transferred.
Interesting. If they repeated courses, though, wouldn't it tack on to their total numbers of credits attempted by the end of their graduation?
I mean, if they had, say they had potentially 5 elective courses after they transferred, and then they ended up using them for the courses that they were told they had to repeat, they could still graduate with the right number of total credits, but they would have had less choice as to which courses they could take.
Sure. Yeah. Cool. Yeah, good point. Just also look at, this is a pretty major finding, obvious finding, but the more developmental education placements students were placed into, the more excess credits attempted they had at graduation. So what's challenging about using this is it's hard to pull apart what's the excess that's coming from transfer credit loss and what's the excess that's coming from developmental education. And we tried to get at this by looking specifically at different types of courses associated with credit loss that I might be able to get to. Yeah.
Hopefully an isolated incident, but have you got any research about administrators, like presidents or anything like that of community colleges? We have a niece who did a degree in interior design and an associate's degree and was urged by the president at that community college not to go on further, to come back and take more courses there, but not to go on further. And I don't know enough about it to say this is not a good idea, but I just, do you have anything like that?
No, I don't know. Yeah, but
hopefully that's an isolated incident.
Yeah.
It disturbed us.
Yeah.
Thinking, and her job situation is not as good as I think it could be if she were to go on and get a bachelor's degree in this. But money is a huge issue for families.
Yeah. Okay. Cooling out, like was mentioned before. So we kind of went further into this analysis, looking at student transcripts. And what we did is we created a lot of variables like as indicators, like whether like basically things like what proportion of students' coursework did they take in 100-level classes before they hit junior standing or before they transferred? Or what proportion of students' coursework did they do in 200 or 300-level classes in their first 60 credits? Or what sort of classes were students taking immediately after they transferred, like in the term or year after they transferred? Like, did they take any 100-level classes in the term or year after they transferred? So we basically tried to just create as many variables using student transcripts as we could to sort of identify what could be indicators of excess credits among transfers. We used data mining analyses, which basically allow you to, and this is kind of, we've been talking about this is kind of a new methodology in educational research. It's theoretical. There's kind of a lot of drawbacks to it, but I think that it's a really interesting way to sort of just examine and describe the data you have. But here's generally what we found. We kind of used results from our data mining and plugged them back into more standard regressions and that sort of thing where we control for other factors. But here's some things that we're noticing. And these are all associations, so this is definitely not causal. But I think some of this rings true to this idea of students being in the right sequence of courses as they progress onto a bachelor's. But we're finding that among all these students, more excess credits were associated with taking a 100-level math class after they transfer. Okay, so this is not a good sign in terms of credit articulation, right? If you're having to essentially repeat an intro math class after you transfer, this could be because you wanted to be a business major at this university and you took algebra instead of calculus or something like that, right? They're taking more 100-level courses before and after 60 credits, so they're kind of loading up on introductory courses. Not a good sign in terms of getting through efficiently. We also found that this was held true for the number of developmental education placements there were, as well as students that were black. We found less excess credit associated with taking more courses in the statewide transfer library that was in one of the states, so that's kind of an encouraging finding, as well as taking more 300-level classes before or after they kind of reached that 60-credit milestone. So we're kind of trying to dig into this more, seeing what the implications are for transfer credit loss. Okay, so another key finding is, so despite all this transfer credit loss, it still seems like the community college route to the bachelor's is still cheaper most of the time. And that's all provided that students are completing, which we know that many of them don't. So this is a study that we released with some economists in our office, Clive Belfield and Davis Jenkins. We basically were asking the questions, so how many credits can community college students lose and still break even in terms of starting, comparing to students who start at the four-year college and get a bachelor's degree? And we found pretty different findings in 2 states. So in the first state, on average, the transfer students, we found that about 61% of their credits were accepted at the 4-year. The average savings in earning a bachelor's degree was about $6,300. So if you started at a community college, on average, you'd save about $6,000 in earning a bachelor's degree. And we did this running Monte Carlo simulations, so about 10,000 different simulations. And we got a likelihood of saving in the 80%. So that's pretty good. And we found that the break-even point for credit loss was about 40 credits not transferring. So in this state, these students could not transfer 40 of their credits, and still it would be cheaper to get a bachelor's degree if they completed. So that's the big, limitation or sort of caveat is if they completed. Yeah.
Is that going into taking into account for fees such as housing and all that stuff, or are we just looking at college credit?
Yeah, I think I can't remember offhand, but I think it was maybe cost per credit. But yeah, I can look and make sure. But yeah, it's an important question. So in the other state, very very different because students were transferring a lot fewer credits. So it was a little bit closer. So they were only saving about $750 getting a bachelor's degree if they started at a community college, much less likely that they actually would save money based on their credit loss or other course failures. And so they had kind of a lower break-even point. But I think just one of the, I think the takeaways here is that asking this question, it just seems to matter a lot based on your context, your state context, like whether it actually is cheaper. OK, so here are the 5 key findings. You all hung in there this post-lunch session, run through a lot of research. So yeah, so when you think about these practices or work that you're doing on your campus, you know, based on what we've seen on some of the barriers to transfer, do you have any reactions to sort of these findings or what you think, you know, might be addressing some of these barriers? Like, do you kind of see the connections or the crossover? Yeah.
So I'm kind of thinking about this from a different angle because I've been doing this for 28 years and I worked at several community colleges when I started. And it seems to me that over the years there has been a focus away from an AA degree to career vocational training at the two-year college. You know, this focus on vocational training and even, you know, State of the Union talks about this. And I just wonder if the faculty at two-year colleges have become more trying to convince their students to take their classes in career-oriented programs. I mean, that's what it seems to me. I just kind of see, and I'm not out of college anymore, so I'm looking at this from the state level, but it just seems like liberal arts faculty, I'm not even seeing as many other system groups. It seems like there's more vocational career-oriented faculty that are involved. And I'm just kind of throwing that out there.
So yeah, I'd be curious to hear folks' reactions, but I think what we're seeing, especially at the community colleges that are implementing these guided pathway reforms, which it's a lot of colleges across the nation, I think they're trying to break down this difference between like academic or vocational, and really just trying to clarify students' interests or kind of trying to figure out what are students' end goals, you know, and if it's going to be a job, you know, is that going to require a bachelor's degree or what's, you know, kind of starting with the area of interest first instead of starting with, well, do you want to be transfer or vocational? The students don't know what that means. It's more about what are you interested in, and then, you know, how do we get you there? And this is like part of the idea behind these guided pathway reforms. It's kind of starting with the end in mind, clarifying students' interest, and then creating that pathway to get there.
Well, just another brief comment. I was also told by the people in charge of our two-year student associations that the two-year college students want a new degree. They don't like it to say, I'm just doing my generals or an AA. They like to say they're in X program. So, I mean, the guided pathways will help with that. Yeah. I just think those are voices that
sure.
influence.
Yeah, and I know there's been a lot of you know, reaction to the whole thing about like we need all these colleges to be vocational colleges, and I think it's kind of missing the point. So yeah.
Hi, I'm Michelle Brown from Oakton Community College in Illinois, and I think first of all, if people could introduce where they're from, I think it would be helpful because this just reinforces the fact that transfer is so different from state to state. Because in Illinois, we actually, at my school, 60% identify as transfer and 40% as career when they enter. But we are moving to the fact that we're not just asking them, do you want transfer or career? We're asking them, what's your end goal? Yeah. What do you want to do when you get done with school, right? And then we're working on the pathways, but we're finding that actually our faculty and our college as a whole is pushing students to get the associate's degree because we know from the research if their end goal is to get a bachelor's degree, they're more successful, more likely to do that if they have the associate's degree. So we're actually pushing them into the associate's degree, but if we can embed certificate programs within that associate's degree that are related, like the pathways, then of course whatever credentials we could get students so they're employable is our goal. But I think in Illinois, we're opposite of what you're seeing. I don't know what state you're from.
Well, I'm not even saying this is true in my state. I'm just I got our nugget, I'm just saying these are things I've heard. And just from a national level, that I keep hearing this vocational.
Yeah.
Right. problem is, like the research shows, so many students are starting at community college and not getting any credential or degree. So I think a lot of the community colleges, bigger picture is let's get them something. Hopefully they'll go on and eventually get a bachelor's degree, but if they don't, they'll have some credential or degree.
Yeah. Just to give you a sense of what this is looking like, this idea of just helping students identify their end goals, I've got just some screenshots of websites that, and you can go and check these out. Looking at colleges' websites is very fascinating and is kind of like an artifact of like, what's happening. So this is Northeast Wisconsin Technical College. Are you from Northeast Wisconsin?
I represent the technical college.
Oh yeah, that's awesome. So they, like a lot of colleges, are, instead of like having a laundry list of programs on their website where everyone picks accounting because it's the first one, that's their major, they're taking all their programs and they're putting them into like broad areas. Sometimes people refer to these as meta majors, but it basically helps students like see what their interest areas or options could be at a college, like in just like a one little view like this. So they call them fields of interest at Northeast Wisconsin. And if you click on one, like you can learn, I'm actually from Wisconsin, so I love showing this slide, but you can learn about transportation, distribution, and logistics, which I still don't know anything about. So like you can go and like watch a YouTube video of someone working, read student stories, and so it's much more focused around the content of like what sort of jobs or like what sort of transfer programs could this lead to, am I interested in this? And you can see all the different programs that, some are certificates, some are associate degrees, some are transfer options. You can look at one in particular, like supply chain management, see what sort of employment potential there is in the area, see when you can start, look at the sort of classes that you'd be taking. That's a big way students like look through programs is like, well, what sort of classes would I take? Look at transfer options. UW Green Bay is nearby. Here's another example from St. Petersburg College. Similarly, like these broad areas like communications, business, education. St. Pete is using a Facebook-like site where students can join their career community, the meta major, and they have like faculty posting like interesting stories, and students are posting things about that career-related area, around transfer or jobs in the area. So basically, these are tools to sort of explore and see if I'm interested in this area. They can pick an area and kind of see within that, what are some of the different jobs or fields or transfer options. What does this look like in our area in terms of salaries and work? So this is another example. Can click on transfer plans. I think like thinking about the website and what can students figure out from your website is a really good question to ask, because if you see just not all the time you can see every student and have a substantial planning and advising appointment with all students, but your students are definitely looking at your website. So this is kind of what it looks like at a couple different colleges. One of the colleges we visited in Washington took the statewide transfer associate degree and kind of put it onto a transfer guide for students, listing out the sort of courses that they would need to take at Everett Community College to transfer to their main destinations. And then this is, it seems pretty simple, but I think this is pretty remarkable that, all you advisors have such like key knowledge about, okay, if you're in business and you're going to transfer to Western Washington University, you need to know that this is the equivalency for this, and you have to take this instead of that. And so the advisors basically kind of wrote this down, prepared it in a way that they could get it out to students so that students could access this information. I just also want to mention before our time is up that we have sort of an institutional assessment tool that you can use, and this is available on our website. You can download it as a Word document, and it basically just runs through each of the practices of the playbook or Tango, Takes Two to Tango publication, and it has some questions for you to think about. So this could be great, sitting around as a planning group to think about, what are the areas that you're doing well in, what are the areas that you could strengthen. And then finally, another resource that we just released, and this is all available on our website, is a guide around how can you access organize and analyze data on your transfer students for community colleges. We really focused on the community colleges for this one. And it gives like tables, example tables of what you could do to replicate the work that we've done nationally and by state, so that then if you follow these sort of methods, this is something that that would be great to like work with your IR folks or other institutional effectiveness folks. I'd be happy to answer any questions too if you want to do that, to basically replicate how we're constructing our cohorts and defining transfer. And if you do that, then you can draw on the state and national benchmarks that are out there. And it kind of gives you just some like suggestions for how to do this analysis, to look at your top transfer partners, as well as like the bachelor's degree areas that students are graduating in. Yep, so I'm happy to stick around, answer any questions. I'd really direct you to our website, ccrc.tc.columbia.edu. You can find all of our information. It's all like totally open access. We want to get this out there into the field as much as we can. But otherwise, thank you all very much for your attention. Enjoy the rest of the conference.